5 ways to safeguard against vacancies in your property. Now, a lot of this comes to due diligence, but things do happen when you have a property. Doesn't matter whether it's residential or commercial, you're going to have a vacancy at some point, right? So it's worthwhile to get those strategies right and combat them in the future so that you've got these in place to safeguard you in case something happens. Now, it might be a great time to invest into gyms because everyone's getting back into gyms. Cycling shops have boomed during COVID and doing really, really well. Pilates studios, reformers are getting booked out because people just love doing any of those work-life balance things go really, really well. But we never know, right? We could have another economic downturn and people decide to cancel subscriptions. They decide that it's not going to work out. Restaurants that are booming, and we've got restaurants that need bookings, may all of a sudden disappear, right? But you might also have that in warehouse. Logistic warehouse people may be now traveling versus then ordering stuff off Amazon, right? Because of all these things. What you thought traditionally might be a really great tenant may not become a great tenant in the future, or that you need to simply swap out a tenant to get the best value of your property. Now, one of the things you've got to remember, having a vacancy does not automatically devalue your commercial property. Number one, that is the falsity of most people think that, oh my God, I've got a vacancy, my property has been devalued. No. It doesn't. Sometimes, especially metro areas, your property could be worth more without a tenant than it is with a tenant. Now, the interesting thing about this is that recently did a deal for a client in Melbourne. She bought a whole floor of office spaces, and I know office spaces isn't the big go-to area, but she's going to get over 6.5% yield in metro, and there's going to be growth on the back end. So she's getting cash flow and growth at the same time, right? But one of the interesting things is $1.45 million is what she spent on the property, and it just settled yesterday. The property upstairs, 2 floors up, went for 1.95 last year vacant. Now, she already knows that it doesn't matter if she has the tenant or not. The tenant's renewed on a 4-year lease. It doesn't matter if she has the tenant or not. She is still going to retain the value of the property even though it's vacant. So really, it's all come to how do you select the property and some of the ways you look for and some of the strategies you put in place to reduce or combat vacancy. So I'm going to share with you my top 5. Number 1, versatility. Versatility is really, really important because back in the day, people wanted to invest childcare. They went in medical centers. They want a tenant that's been there for 20, 30 years. The problem is that property is so ingrained with the tenant that it's almost like when an actor is typecast, right? It's so purposely built for them that it's very, very hard for them to change the use of the property, to move out, for you to renovate. It costs hundreds of $1,000s for them to make good on that property, right? So this is where the danger comes in, is that property is so fixed that if they were to move out, just imagine if McDonald's moved out, and they have in Coffs Harbour, how hard it is to re-tenant that property, right? Just think how hard it is to re-tenant a McDonald's, right? Where it can really only be used for another fast food tenant rather than anything else, right? Just think about when Masters warehouses that was competing with Bunnings went. How hard was it to repurpose that, right? Really, really hard, right? So you got to think about versatility is the number 1 way to combat vacancies. So what that means is, can your property go from a warehouse property that's traditionally with logistics tenant? Can it go to a dental tenancy? Probably not. Can it go to a martial arts studio, a play center? Yeah, probably so, right? Can your office space go from a training organization to a government tenancy, a medical center, even a childcare? Yes, most likely, because that's been done already. Can your retail space, that's a dentist, go to a hairdresser, a restaurant, a cafe, going back to maybe, H&R Block? Absolutely, right? Versatility is going to be the key to combating your vacancies. Because if you have a vacancy, if the tenant come in and refurbish it, or you can bring it back to a nice warm shell the next tenant can use straight away for something else, then that is where you're going to get the most amount of uplift in terms of value, but maintaining your rental levels as well. So versatility is most important, right? Especially it's come out after COVID. Versatility is the number 1 thing that you should be looking for in your commercial property. But 2 is demand. Demand is different in commercial than it is in residential. Demand is about what happens in the local area. Doesn't mean that retail is in demand across whole of Australia, but there's certainly different towns and different states, different areas where retail is more the preferred choice versus industrial or office space. Now, same is there is office space hubs or office space buildings where it's fully tenanted in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane of a particular type of tenant, and it creates a hub on its own, right? And so the demand is there, right? Imagine those buildings, remember where they have specialists in there that are built across from a hospital or an area zone medical. Those buildings are really in demand. They're higher than all the other buildings in rate per square meter in rent, but they're always full because they're full of specialists who needs to be across the road to the hospital, right? They're basically destination tenants. It doesn't matter that it might be really hard to find parking, that it's really inconvenient in a cross section. Ultimately, your client need to go there. Ultimately, your tenants are there for a reason, and their clients will go there and find them no matter what, right? So that is the key. The demand is there. You've got to look at the demand, and in each state, even in each suburb, it can be different. So demand is really important. Number 3 is tenant mix. Tenant mix is about the tenancy mix that's in this building or on that strip. So if you're buying a strip shop and you've got professional services. So you might have a strip shop where you have mortgage brokers, financial planners, lawyers, accountants, kebab shop. Well, that doesn't match, does it? Doesn't mix in with the tenant hub. See, this is one of the key areas. When I went to Kelvin Grove, right, in Brisbane, right, and when you go to Eastwood and Sunnybank and Glen Waverley, what do you see most of? You see pearl tea or bubble tea places within literally next door to each other or within 100 to 200 meters walking distance. So in the same spot you stand, you could see four, literally. Most of the time you could go to an area like this and how do you know that the areas, you see 4 bubble tea places next door to each other and they're all busy with people. They're all got queues lined up and they're all busy and they all trade 7 days a week and they've still got lots of people and they all charge close to $10 for a tea, right? So that is classic tenant hub and demand flowing on. Tenant hub with the tenants and flow traffic, right? That tenant mix, really, really important, right? There's a difference. Like when you go to an area and you see bubble tea, this is what I think. When I see an area like that, I'm like, oh my God, there's this an area where it's predominantly Asian clients or Southeast Asian foot traffic that has that demand, because people do order bubble tea through DoorDash or Uber, but most of the time is an experience. They meet with their friends. They don't go to a cafe. They're going to have a bubble tea. They go and they have it along the way as they shop. They have it as a treat for their kids. Whatever it is an area that's dominated by that foot traffic. So you got to think about tenant mix, tenant hub. So what's the hub? And also the foot traffic. Those things blend together to make the third point, which is about having the correct tenant mix and tenant hub to continue to support the re-tenancy. Because when you see in those areas, when one shop becomes vacant, typically within a couple of weeks, a new tenant goes in and they're of a similar type of tenants, right? And it's the same when you look at a councillor area, right? When you go to a council area, when you go overseas, don't you see all the councillors next to each other? Right? You've got the Russian council, the Australian, you've got the British, they're all next to each other, right? Next to each other, right? So that's a classic example of tenant hub and tenant mix, right? When you see medical buildings, when you see even like education facilities, it's got like 3 or 4 levels and they're all full of this different education tenants, right? But serving different needs and different areas of education, right? Classic tenant mix, right? It means, again, safeguard yourself against vacancies as well. But also, number four, it's really important that I look at is actually rent, right? Is your rent above market, below market? Is it on market? One of the key things is you shouldn't be scared of vacancies if your tenant's paying below market rent. When you put your rent up, and you will eventually put the rent up at some point, whether it's a market review or when this tenant moves out, but you're not scared of vacancies if you know the next tenant coming in is going to pay you 10% or 20% more rent. It means that they've actually added more money to your bottom line. So yeah, you might have a vacancy and it might be a short-term pain of 3 months or even 6 months, right? But if you have been a smart strategist and you've had a good guiding team and a hands-on hand hold you and give you strategy and mentorship through this, like Unikorn Commercial Property or Helen, Tarrant, myself and my team, we can help you combat this vacancy issue. But most importantly is that putting all these strategies in place and putting a buffer in place to correctly combat that, so you're not stressed out and you know there's an accurate timeline where you could get it tenanted, right? And that's really what you need. We're not scared of vacancies, but what we are scared of is we're scared of having a bottomless pit. But where you can safely calculate that and you can safely buffer for it, this is where the strategy comes in. So if you want to find out more what we can do, what we can help you in your commercial property journey, there's a link below to booking for a free strategy call, or join one of my Facebook communities where we can share latest information on commercial property, hot deals, and best locations to buy in. So click the link to join there for my free Facebook group, plus booking for your free strategy call where we can put all of this together for you in an obligation-free meeting. Anyway, back to the strategy around that rental increase. So the rental increase, right? Rental increase, if you're going to wait, say 3 months or 6 months, and you're going from $60,000 to $70,000 in the rental increase, yeah, look, you've sustained a loss here, but you're going to gain it back in the capital value on the back end of your property. And going forward, each year you're going to get more cash flow. So you're going to recuperate that loss that you've had in that 3 to 6 months within a 12-month period, and you're going to be way ahead with the value almost immediately once it gets a tenant in there. So, and you're probably going to get a better quality of tenant in there as well. So that is not to be worried about vacancy. In fact, you look forward to having a vacancy instead of not having a vacancy, because you know the value of your property is going to increase. I have a classic example like this with the property that I have in Chatswood, where I can't wait for the tenant to actually default and leave, and they're never going to. They keep telling me I'm never going to, I'm always going to pay our rent on time, I'm going to exercise options, because they're paying below 30% below market rent. Now, when they leave, I know I'm going to increase $1 million to the back end, the value of my property in the back end. So in that case, I'm not scared of vacancy. In fact, I look forward to it, and that's what you need to look for to combat your vacancies. And then, of course, we've got one last one, the number 5. And in fact, if you stay on, I'm going to actually share with you that to the end, after we talk about the 5, there's another one that I actually throw in there in the mix just to make sure we're super, super safe against vacancies, right? So number 5 is location. Now, location, most people will think if you're buying residential, you put that right atop, location, location, location. No, 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 no. It's actually not as important as the tenant mix, the tenant hub, the versatility of the property, the demand, right? All of the other things I mentioned. Location is the last one. Now, location talks about where the property is, right? Now, location is really important for attracting a tenant and the next tenant, right? So it goes along with versatility, but sometimes a location is what a tenant looks for, right? A particular type of location that works for that tenant. So let's talk about industrial tenants. Industrial tenants want to be close to logistics, artillery, roads. They want to be close to be able to get to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, wherever they are in the freeway. So location of a particular business park and being in that business park is really important. A classic example of that is Brisbane Airport. It's land holding, so it's leasehold, it's not freehold. And if you don't know about that, check out my other videos where we talk about the differences in the commercial property holdings. But the most important thing is the land, it's leasehold, kind of like Canberra. Now, there is probably about 3 or 4 buildings and 3 or 4 streets behind the airport itself that are all filled with aviation or support of freight logistic type tenants, right? So that's really important because they need access to the airport straight away. They literally will be within the airport in 5-10 minutes, and they need to put things on to a plane. They could be there in 10 minutes. And these typical people who do logistics, so Bowen Mangoes is there, like they literally, their head office for Brisbane is there so they can freight mangoes onto the plane to go everywhere around Australia. But we have like the people who supply food to Qantas and the other airlines are there, right? We have people who do like airplane hires, airplane schools that are there because it's close to the airport. We've got people who do like products like that they need to ship. So they're like freight forwarders. They're basically, you know, your drop shipping, they're there, right? You've got people who do a service. They might service planes. They might do waste management for planes. They will do, they will supply cleaning for the planes. All of those people are located there. Their location for them there is paramount to their business, right? So you're going to find, obviously during COVID, they've had a bit of a hit, but now fully recovered, right? So there are certain tenants who are location-based. Franchisees is a classic example. They need to be there because that's the boundary of their franchise, right? So Location comes in terms of minimizing your vacancy, because there's certain tenants that are location driven and they have to be there. Childcare, in fact, is another one, because they want to be in a certain area and a demographic as well. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video, right? So do me a favor, if you really, really like the video and it's really great value, drop me a comment, hit the subscribe button and the like. Make sure you share it with people you know, because we really want to pass the word out about commercial property and how it is actually a better investment than residential. I absolutely believe this. If you want to find out more, please check us out. Buy the book that's called Cashed Up with Commercial Properties and give you the definitive guide on commercial property. But the most important thing is I'm going to give you my nugget, my final one of how to minimize vacancies. And the final one is tenant investment. How much has your tenant invested in the property? It's paramount to how long the tenant's going to stay, but also what your next incoming tenant is going to pay and why they would choose your property versus someone else's. Why is that important? See, let's say that your tenant's coming in and they're a dentist. They're going to put $250,000 to $400,000 into your property. You're giving them a bare shell. They're going to mark it up with 2 or 3 rooms. They're going to have a foyer. They're going to have all their medical equipment plumbed in, going, x-ray machines, all of that in, right? Once that in, they don't want to move. Do you know how many years it takes off to write off medical equipment? For a hospital, somewhere between 15 to 20 years to write off, like literally $3 to $5 million of equipment. So when you're doing theaters and operating theater, that's how much it costs, right? For a dentist, it can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years to write off all of their fit out, depending on how much they spend. And the equipment that they buy, that's just the fit out. I haven't even talked about chairs, aircon, all their staff that they put in there. You could easily be $500,000. But even for a hairdresser, they could spend anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000 on a premise fit out. Beauty therapists do the same. By the time they get all the machines in, they could be easily spending $300K, right? So don't discount the amount of fit out your tenant has put into this property. Don't discount that the effort they put into to renovate, to fit out, to change your property. And sometimes it adds more value to your property than you think, because just imagine a commercial kitchen costs around $100,000 minimum. Your tenant, who is a brand new tenant coming into your premise, grease trap, everything plumbed in, spends $100,000 on a kitchen, then $50,000 fitting out everything else. They've spent $150,000. They start trading. Say in 3 years' time, they decide their business is not working, right? They've got a couple of options. They still have a lease. They might be on a 5 by 5 year lease with you, but they could sell their business. They've got this equipment, they've got the lease, they've got trading history, got some goodwill, pass the business on. You get an incoming buyer who's probably going to be a little bit more experienced, who can really turn the business around. They're going to do better. They're going to renew the option and keep on staying. And you can probably even adjust rent. So that's number one good point about your tenant investing that money. Secondly, let's say the tenant goes bankrupt and says, no, you know what, I need to walk out, but I've spent $150,000 and you can keep that fit out because I'm not going to be able to see out my lease. Fantastic. Because the next incoming tenant doesn't have to spend that same money fitting it out. If a tenant is looking at a chef that's starting out on his own, leaving his own job, he doesn't have $150,000 or $200,000. He's probably thinking, I'll just take over rent a cafe or a restaurant that already has a fit out. Even if it's something that's cheap, even if something that is not new, I can work with it for the moment and upgrade it over time. Well, he comes and looks at your premise versus someone else who's a bare shell, who hasn't got it, and he's like, well, I could save $150,000, but I can trade tomorrow, right? Trade tomorrow, bring money in the door, then I am going to be able to win at all costs, right? So it's all about them being able to win. The tenants are looking at it. I could spend that $150,000 in investing in my business, as in the marketing, advertising, bringing clients in, or I can spend $150,000 on fit out. And if you already have the fit out done for the tenant, then why would they not choose your property versus someone else's, right? So there's multiple ways of combating vacancies. And you shouldn't be scared of vacancies in commercial property, because vacancies in commercial property can really be a plus if you know how to turn it around. This is where it comes to strategy. If you've got your strategy right, you've got a team who gave you the strategy during the due diligence period, who helped you, who's there for you after settlement, then that is the company you need to look for to support you through that process. So check us out, helentarrant.com, Unikorn Commercial Property, unikorn.com.au with a K, right? And let us help you in your commercial property journey. But the most important thing, keep watching, spread the news on commercial property investment, because it is a better investment than residential.